Good morning. How are you today? It's gorgeous. The dormant brown grass is being replaced by a spectrum of greens, and uh, and you can feel the life coming up out of the ground. You can see the buds. There are little animals running across the roads. I have a couple of birds that seem to be following me as I walk today. It's a wonderful time, and it's hard to deal almost with the contradictions of the life around us that seem to promulgate, foster difficult times. You know, the problems with the pandemic and with the finances and everything else like that, they're all important issues to discuss, but I can't in my mind get past the trial of the murderer Chauvin, who killed a person of color, a black man, an African American man, George Floyd, in Minneapolis, about a year ago, 11 months ago. And now we're on trial, a murder trial. And it's incomprehensible how one man could do that to another man, unless he did not treat him as a man, think of him as a man, believe he was a man. Now, you and I believe he is, that he's a brother. He's the brother of another mother. He may have had to suffer compromises, in part because of his color. Those of us who are white did not have to suffer, because they couldn't see who we were not, that we were not human, not persons, because that's who George Floyd is to a guy like, well, our man, Chauvin, out in Minneapolis. There's been a historic experience that created this kind of attitude, and it was about empire, and it was about land and property and funds. So when in international law the explorers first came to America, the law said that you couldn't just take land if it was inhabited, and so they denied the humanity of those they found here. And we know in the years since, those who seized the land tried to eliminate Native Americans because they had the temerity to resist people taking their land, because they had foolishly thought of the explorers arriving here as persons, and because the people who came here gave them disease. This not as intentional as other acts that they took. So we introduced a Declaration of Independence that said all men are created equal, but it was our foundation lie. It's a lie that we have just never completely gotten past. We've been through a civil war. We passed civil rights amendments. We had cases in the Supreme Court that said separate was not equal. We had Voting Rights Act, Civil Rights Act, and still, George Floyd is not a person. He's not a man. Not to Chauvin, the man who killed him. That incomprehensible act is at the heart of the American problem. The thing that endangers our soul and our future and our wisdom going forward. That we have so many Americans who see persons of color as Chauvin does. And that's why this trial is so important. This trial tells us about Chauvin, tells us about that community, but it tells us about America. This man must be convicted. No, I'm not being unfair. I believe the evidence is overwhelming, and I worry, as you've heard me say, about how elusive justice can be when the victim is a person of color and therefore not considered a man, a person. But we have to get this right, and we should keep in mind that the defense counsel is supported by other policemen who are funding this defense. And so we have this notion of, is there systemic racism? And who is defending this guy? Why isn't he isolated and an orphan because of his outrageous act? And his act is worse than the kinds of crimes against persons of color that we've seen, because as it's happening, the community, including people who know about the ability to breathe, about asphyxiation, they're telling him, let him up, let him breathe, stop, he's dying. The pulse stops, still he persists. That's the intent. We don't need 1,000 redundant experts to tell us this at the trial. In fact, I think that invites doubt myself. So, some ask, would I defend Chauvin being a criminal defense lawyer? No, I wouldn't. Not everybody's entitled to have me defend them. And you can't defend a person if you can't believe in some aspect of the defense. Often, it is that a person is charged with too many offenses. You can't charge him with enough offenses as far as I'm concerned. Some are concerned about defense counsel, about the severity of the sentence. I'm not concerned about that. I think he should get at least life. I don't believe death is available, and I don't support the death penalty even in his case. Let him spend the rest of his life in a cell. So that's where I stand on this, but I think that the implication of this trial is great for America. That is, if there is a conviction, it will lay the path, the possible path for reform among our spineless elected officials. It may give them the grit to do it. Because as you notice, they follow like a weather vane what America is saying. And they often get led by us, we the people. And so we have to lead them to do reforms. And if we have to protest outside of Manchin's office and other people who don't get it, what America's about and what we need to do to correct that lie that stays with us all these years, then we should do it. So, on this beautiful day, I'm off my soapbox, and I hope you have a good time. I'm not exactly among trees, but I am among all this wonderful greenery, and it is a salve for the soul to have such a thing to accompany us as we do battle with the unwashed, ignorant, racist bigots in our country. Talk to you. Bye-bye.